My husband died at 5:47 a.m. My son was at a party by 6:15. He skipped the funeral reception for a gala. Then he showed up at my door demanding millions. I smiled and handed him an envelope. My husband took his last breath at 5:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'd been watching the clock on the nightstand for 2 hours by then. That old brass clock Harold had bought at a garage sale in 1987 for $3.50, which he refused to replace because he said, "It still tells the right time twice a day, Elaine, and that's more than I can say for most politicians." I used to roll my eyes at that joke. 31 years of marriage, and he told it at least 40 times. By the end, I would have given anything to hear it one more time. 5:47 a.m., and the room went quiet in a way rooms only go quiet when the one person filling them with presence, with breath, with weight, with the small, unconscious sounds of a human being simply existing, is suddenly, irreversibly gone. I sat with him for 23 minutes. Then I picked up the phone and called my son. He answered laughing. I should tell you about Harold first, because you need to understand what kind of man he was before you can understand what came next. Not who he was at the end, frail and diminished in that rented hospital bed we'd set up in the living room so he could look out at his garden. I mean who he was in the middle, in the long, grinding, unglamorous middle of a life built from nothing. Harold James Whitmore grew up in Decatur, Illinois, the second of 4 children born to a man who worked the grain elevator and a woman who cleaned houses on the north side of town. He put himself through 2 years of community college on a partial scholarship and the wages from 3 simultaneous part-time jobs, then transferred to a state university, graduated with a degree in accounting, and went to work for a small manufacturing firm where he spent 11 years learning, with obsessive, almost religious focus, how money moved through the world. He was 34 years old when he made his first real investment, $40 in a biotech company that everyone, his colleagues, his brothers, the men at his church, told him was a waste of money. He didn't sell when the stock dipped. He didn't panic when it halved. He waited 4 years, and when he finally sold, he turned that $40 into $2,316. He told me that story on our second date, not to impress me, but because he wanted me to understand something about himself. Most people can't stand to wait, he said, folding his paper napkin into a precise square. They want the reward before they've earned the patience. I'm not wired that way, Elaine. I think that's either my greatest strength or my greatest flaw, and I haven't decided which yet. I married him 8 months later. For 29 of our 31 years together, we lived below our means. Not poverty. We were never poor, not technically, but the kind of deliberate, chosen scarcity that other people find difficult to explain and harder to respect. We drove used cars, we clipped coupons, we bought clothes off the clearance rack and shoes that Harold would resold twice before replacing. We ate Hamburger Helper on Tuesdays and packed lunches every single workday and took one vacation every 3 years, always within driving distance, always off-season. What Harold was doing, quietly and methodically, over all those decades, was building something. By the time he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at age 68, a diagnosis that arrived with crushing efficiency 11 months after his retirement, Harold James Whitmore had accumulated $3.2 million. Stock portfolios, municipal bonds, 2 small rental properties in neighboring counties, and a savings account with enough in it to cover 7 years of the kind of medical care he was going to need. Our son Derek knew none of this. We had decided, together, Harold and I, sitting at that kitchen table with a pot of coffee between us, that we would not tell Derek about the money until he demonstrated the kind of character that deserved it. We weren't being cruel. We weren't playing games. We were being parents, in the old-fashioned sense, waiting to see who our child would become before handing him the thing that might determine it. We waited a long time. Derek is 43 years old. He sells commercial real estate in a mid-sized city 4 hours away, drives a leased BMW he mentions in casual conversation more than any adult should, and has been married for 6 years to a woman named Vanessa, who has a talent for making everything she touches feel slightly lesser than it was before. He calls on birthdays. He visits at Christmas, usually for 2 days, always seeming vaguely impatient to leave. He sends nice enough cards. He is not a monster. I want to be careful to say that. He is not a monster. He is simply a man who, at some point in his 30s, decided that comfort was a virtue and convenience was a right, and arranged his life accordingly. He had not visited his father in 8 months before Harold died. He had spoken to him by phone twice in those 8 months. Twice. When I called him at 6:15 on that Tuesday morning, his father's body still warm in the room behind me, and Derek answered laughing at something happening at the Hendersons' brunch. A brunch at 6:15 in the morning, which tells you everything you need to know about the world Derek lives in. I had a sudden, crystalline moment of clarity. I knew exactly what the next several months were going to look like. I just didn't know yet what I was going to do about it. Your father is dead, Derek. The laughter stopped. Silence. The particular silence of a person recalibrating, reassembling their expression from the inside out. Then, oh, wow, that's okay. When's the funeral? I told him Saturday, 4 days away. The funeral home had a slot. Harold had prearranged almost everything years prior. Another thing Derek didn't know. And I saw no reason to prolong it. That's really short notice, he said. I didn't answer. It's just, Vanessa already bought the dress for the Ashford Gala. It's Saturday night. We've had these tickets for 3 months. Dad would understand. He'd want us to be practical. Practical? My husband was dead. His body hadn't been moved yet. I hung up. I sat back down in the chair beside the hospital bed, reached over, and and took Harold's hand one more time. It was already cooling. I held it anyway. He said you'd want us to be practical, I told him. I swear the brass clock ticked a little louder after that. I called Roger Pemberton that same morning. Roger had been Harold's attorney for 22 years, a compact, precise man in his late 60s who wore the same style of navy suit every day and kept a cactus on his desk because, he once explained to Harold, he admired anything that could thrive on almost nothing. He answered on the second ring, offered condolences in the direct, non-performative way that made Harold trust him, and told me to come in whenever I was ready. Soon, I said, there are things I need to understand. I'll pull the file today. What the file contained was this. Harold's existing will, drawn up 4 years prior, left everything, the full estate, all accounts, all properties, every asset, to Derek. Harold had told me this. I had not objected at the time because at the time I had believed, or wanted to believe, that Derek would surprise us, that some crisis or passage of time would reveal the better version of him that I was sure existed somewhere, dormant, waiting to be called forward. The funeral was on Saturday. Derek arrived 17 minutes late. He sat in the back row, not beside me, not near me. The back row, with Vanessa in a dark dress I recognized as new, her eyes moving to her phone before Pastor Graves had finished the opening prayer. I know this because Mrs. Eleanor Chen, our neighbor for 27 years, a woman who has seen more of my life than most of my family, leaned over and squeezed my hand at the exact moment I noticed, and I understood from the pressure of her fingers that she had noticed too, and that we were going to be doing this grief thing together, she and I, the way women so often end up doing the hard things, quietly, without making a fuss, because making a fuss would only embarrass everyone and the person most deserving of embarrassment was clearly immune to it. The service lasted 47 minutes. The reception in the church basement ran for another 2 hours. Neighbors brought food. Harold's former colleagues told stories. His youngest brother, Frank, who drove 6 hours from Ohio, sat with me for a long time and didn't say anything particularly useful, but said it with enough genuine heartbreak that I was grateful for the company. Derek found me at the 45-minute mark. He already had his coat on. He touched my arm, kissed my cheek, said he was sorry, hugged me while I stood stiff as a post, and I felt him check his watch during the hug. Twice, 2 distinct glances. I felt the movement of his wrist against my shoulder blade, and then he stepped back and said they needed to get on the road because the gala started at 7 and it was a 4-hour drive. Your father's reception just started, I said. I know. I'm sorry. A pause. We'll come back next weekend. Go through Dad's things. Figure out the estate situation. I watched him walk across the church basement toward the door, past the tables of food that the women of this community had spent their mornings preparing, past Harold's brother Frank, who looked up from his coffee, and watched Derek leave with an expression I won't attempt to describe because some expressions are too old and too tired to need description. He didn't look back. Mrs. Chen was beside me again. Neither of us said anything. Some things don't require words. Sunday morning, 6 a.m. I sat at Harold's desk in the dark. The desk was a big oak thing he'd found at an estate sale and spent a weekend refinishing in the garage, listening to the Cardinals game on a transistor radio. Every drawer was organized in the precise, systematic way that had driven me slightly crazy for 30 years, and which I now understood, sitting in the quiet of a house that felt 3 sizes too large, was one of the most intimate expressions of who Harold was. Everything labeled, everything filed, everything preserved, because Harold believed that a record was a form of respect, that the act of documenting something was a way of saying this mattered, this was real, this happened. I pulled out the will, read it 3 times, everything to Derek. I set it down, picked up a pen, started writing. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I thought they might. But there is a particular kind of calm that arrives when grief burns away every possible confusion and leaves behind only the clear, cold shape of what is right. My hands were steady. My thinking was clear. I had 31 years of Harold's example behind me, and Harold had taught me, by demonstration, not lecture, that the right decision and the comfortable decision are different animals, and that only one of them is worth making. By noon, I had a list. By Monday morning, I was in Roger Pemberton's office, sitting in the same leather chair I'd sat in 4 years ago when we signed the original will, with Harold beside me and the afternoon light coming through the same window, and I slid a handwritten document across the desk and watched Roger read it. He looked up, took off his reading glasses, set them down. He'll fight this, Roger said. Not if, will. 22 years of knowing the family had given him that certainty. He'll claim diminished capacity, undue influence. He'll say you were grieving, not thinking clearly. He'll make it ugly, Elaine. I know. These challenges can take years. They can be expensive, emotionally. Roger, I folded my hands in my lap. Harold kept every financial record, every statement, every sacrifice, every dollar we didn't spend so that money could compound for another year. I have 50 years of documentation in that desk. Any judge in this state will see exactly where that money came from and exactly what kind of relationship Derek had with the man who built it. Roger was quiet for a moment. And where is it going? The amended will. The Alzheimer's Association. The county public library. Harold used that library every week of his adult life, and it's been underfunded for a decade. A scholarship fund for first-generation college students in this county, because Harold was one and nobody ever helped him. Another silence. Derek gets nothing. Derek gets exactly what he gave his father. Roger picked up his pen. I'll need a few days to draft this properly. Take the time you need. Take all the time in the world. Harold taught me how to wait. wait. 6 weeks passed. I cleaned out the closets. I tended the garden. I had Harold's old transistor radio repaired by a man in town who said he hadn't seen one like it in 20 years, and I put it on the kitchen windowsill, where I could listen to the Cardinals while I made coffee. I went to dinner twice with Mrs. Chen. I slept better than I expected and cried more than I expected, and on the whole found that grief, like most hard things, was survivable in a way that couldn't be understood from the outside. Then Derek called, cheerful, breezy, the voice he uses for business calls, warm but calibrated, the warmth having a kind of practiced quality, like a man who learned friendliness the way others learn a foreign language. Hey mom, hope you're doing okay. Listen, Vanessa and I have been talking. Some really exciting investment opportunities have come up, and we were thinking, once the estate settles and we get everything sorted out, we'd love to sit down with the financial team and talk through some options. It might make sense to liquidate some of the smaller assets first, so if you could set up a meeting with Roger. He kept talking. I stood at the kitchen window and watched a robin land on Harold's garden, on the wooden stake beside the tomato bed that Harold had painted red because he said tomatoes needed something cheerful to grow toward. Probably need to get an accounting of all the holdings just so we have a clear picture. And Vanessa has a contact in commercial real estate who might be interested in the rental properties. Come Sunday, I said. A pause. Sorry? Come Sunday. Bring Vanessa. I have something for you. They arrived 20 minutes late. I had expected that. Vanessa came through the door first, wearing oversized sunglasses that she kept on indoors, scanning the living room with a particular kind of attention that I recognized from the one time, years ago, that a real estate appraiser had walked through the house. She moved her eyes across Harold's furniture, his books, his framed photographs from 50 years of Cardinals seasons, and I watched her reach conclusions. This is so cozy, she said, with a smile that meant the opposite. Derek kissed my cheek, said I looked well. He was already glancing past me toward the desk, toward the room, his eyes doing the same inventory his wife's had done, the two of them as well matched in this as they were in most things. I brought coffee. We sat. Vanessa kept her sunglasses on. Derek folded his hands on the table in the comfortable, expectant posture of a man who believes he is about to receive good news. So what's this about, Mom? Estate paperwork ready to sign? Something like that, I said. I stood, went to Harold's desk, opened the top right drawer, labeled, in Harold's handwriting, correspondence active, and removed the plain white envelope that Roger had delivered 3 days prior, walked back to the kitchen table, held it out. Derek took it, smiled his confident business smile, turned it over in his hands. Is this? He started to laugh a little, some private certainty in his chest that told him this was money. This was what he'd driven 4 hours for. This was the moment the long waiting converted to something useful. This is why you came, right? That's right, I said quietly. That's exactly why you came. He opened the envelope. He started reading. The smile disappeared. Not quickly, gradually, the way light fades at the end of day, each clause of the document pulling something out of his face until there was nothing left but white. His hands started trembling. Vanessa leaned across, read over his shoulder, went still. Derek looked up at me. Mom, his voice had changed entirely. All the business warmth was gone, stripped away to something younger and rawer underneath, something I recognized with a complicated kind of pain as the voice of the boy he'd been before the BMW and the galas and the practiced confidence. What is this? It's your inheritance. He flipped through the pages. 3 pages, Roger's careful legal language making it precise and airtight. There's nothing here. There's no money. It all goes to charities? The library? He looked up, and I saw something else in his face now, behind the confusion, the beginning of outrage, the indignation that arrives when a person has been so certain of something for so long that its absence feels like theft. You can't do this. This isn't legal. Dad's original will has been superseded. I picked up my chamomile tea. Legally and properly. Roger Pemberton has the documentation. 22 years of Harold's financial records are filed with that documentation. Every sacrifice, every year of hamburger helper, every pair of shoes resoled instead of replaced, every dollar that compounded over 50 years while your father worked and waited and built something. It's all there, Derek. Every judge in this state will see exactly what that money is and exactly where it came from. You can't. He stood up, sat back down. His hands were shaking badly enough now that the papers rattled. I'll get a lawyer. I'll challenge this. I'll tell them you were grieving, that you weren't in your right mind, that someone pressured you. You're welcome to try. I said it gently, not cruelly, genuinely gently, because cruelty had never been my impulse and I had no interest in it now. Roger has anticipated every challenge. But I'd encourage you, Derek, before you spend money on attorneys, to sit quietly for a moment and think about what a courtroom proceeding would look like, what it would require you to explain. The phone call at 6:15 in the morning when you were at a brunch, the gala, the back row, the watch. He stared at me. What watch? You checked it twice, I said, while you were hugging me at your father's funeral. The silence in that kitchen was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. Vanessa had taken her sunglasses off. She was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her face in 6 years of knowing her. Not contempt, not calculation, not the bored assessment she usually wore. She looked for the first time like a person confronting something she hadn't prepared for. I looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw his father's hands, the same square shape, trembling now around papers that had rearranged his universe. I saw a man who had made 30 years of small choices in the direction of comfort and convenience and had arrived, as those choices will eventually bring you, at a moment of reckoning. I felt something for him in that moment. Not the anger I might have expected, not the cold satisfaction that people assume must accompany revenge. I felt the particular sorrow of a parent who sees their child clearly and wishes, despite everything, that what they saw were different. I loved your father for 31 years, I said. I was with him every day for the last 3 of those years, when he couldn't walk without help, when he couldn't button his own shirts, when he needed to be turned in the night so he didn't get sores. I was there at 5:47 in the morning when he took his last breath, and I held his hand for 23 minutes after, and then I called you. I set down my teacup. You were at a brunch. You told me your father would want us to be practical. Derek's jaw moved. Nothing came out. The money your father built came from 50 years of choosing sacrifice over comfort. Every single day. Every single day, Derek. He made that choice so that you wouldn't have to. And when it was time to say goodbye to him, you chose the gala. I stood. I think you should go, I said. I believe you have somewhere to be. They left without another word. I stood at the kitchen window and watched the BMW back out of the driveway. Watched it pause for a moment at the end of the street, long enough that I wondered briefly if Derek was going to come back, and then watched it turn and disappear. The robin was still on the tomato steak. I called Roger that afternoon. He told me Derek's attorney had already been in touch, a young associate at a firm in the city who had reviewed the documentation and apparently told Derek something to the effect that challenging the will was not a fight he was likely to win. Roger, who has the gift of understatement, described the conversation as brief. Did he say anything else? I asked. He said his client would need some time to process things. He has all the time in the world, I said. That's one of the things Harold left him. 3 months later, I'm sitting at Harold's desk on a Sunday morning, the transistor radio playing softly in the kitchen, the light coming in at that low October angle that turns everything warm. The Alzheimer's Association sent a formal acknowledgement letter with a note from their director about what the gift would fund. The library called. The branch director, a woman named Patricia Holloway who has worked there for 24 years, cried for a moment on the phone and then apologized for crying, and I told her not to, that Harold would have appreciated it. The scholarship fund has its first 3 applicants. I read every one of their essays. Every single one of them had a story about watching a parent sacrifice something, sleep, health, a dream, a little piece of themselves, to keep them fed and housed and moving forward. Every one of them had a line, somewhere in the middle, about wanting to make that sacrifice mean something. Harold would have loved that. Derek has called twice. The first time I let it go to voicemail, and the message was halting and strange, neither apology nor accusation, but something uncomfortable in between, the sound of a person not quite ready to say the thing that would actually matter. The second time, last week, I answered. He asked how I was doing. I told him I was well. The garden had a good harvest. I was sleeping better. He asked if and here he paused for a long time, long enough that I could hear him deciding whether to say the thing, if I thought we could have dinner sometime. Of course, I said. Come whenever you'd like. He hasn't confirmed a date yet.